I covered for my boss after she blamed me for her mistake, but when she got promoted instead of me, I finally understood how easily loyalty gets punished. My name is Samantha, I'm 29 years old, and I've been working at a mid-sized marketing firm in Chicago for nearly 6 years. I grew up in a single-parent household. My mom worked double shifts as a nurse, so I learned early how to be responsible, reliable, and self-reliant. I also learned the hard way that loyalty can be both a virtue and a trap. I started at my current company as an intern during college. I was ambitious, punctual, and eager to prove myself. I quickly realized that my boss, Rebecca, was brilliant at her job but had a reputation for being complicated. She could inspire her team to achieve things they didn't think possible, but she also had a tendency to shift blame, micromanage, and play favorites. Most people tolerated her because she brought in results, and honestly, I admired her work ethic and creativity. I liked feeling useful to someone so successful. By the time I officially joined the team full-time after graduation, Rebecca had taken me under her wing. I became her go-to person for tight deadlines, high-pressure presentations, and last-minute client crises. She often told me I was indispensable, and I believed it. I put in long hours, stayed late to edit slides or write proposals, and even worked weekends when the office demanded it. I justified the sacrifices by telling myself that loyalty and hard work would eventually pay off. Surely someone who covered for her as often as I did deserved recognition, right? It wasn't all bad. Early in my career, Rebecca could be inspiring. She had a knack for turning messy client briefs into polished campaigns and somehow made the impossible seem achievable. I learned more in a few months under her than I had during my entire internship. But the cracks started to show when small mistakes began being forgotten by her and conveniently found on me instead. The first time I realized it was happening, I almost brushed it off. It was a Friday afternoon when a major client called, furious over a miscommunication about their campaign timeline. Rebecca had mistakenly sent them the wrong dates. But instead of taking responsibility, she sighed dramatically and muttered, "Samantha, make sure this is fixed and call them. I don't want to deal with the fallout." I was stunned. I had been with the client on previous calls, knew exactly what she'd done. But her delivery left no room for argument. I spent the rest of the afternoon fielding angry emails, smoothing over the misunderstanding, and convincing the client it had been a minor error that was fully resolved. Meanwhile, Rebecca disappeared into her office, leaving me to manage the mess she'd created. I confronted her afterward. "Rebecca, that wasn't fair. You sent the wrong timeline." She looked at me with a mixture of exasperation and amusement. "Samantha, you're too literal sometimes. I didn't send the wrong timeline. It was a miscommunication. But you're smart. You know how to make this right, and I trust you. That's why I asked you to handle it." I swallowed my frustration. I knew from experience that arguing with her would only make her defensive. Instead, I said, "Okay, I'll take care of it." And I did. I spent hours drafting emails, following up with the client, and making sure every little detail was corrected. By the time the weekend arrived, the client had calmed down, and I felt drained but relieved that I had managed the fallout. That incident was the first of many. Over time, I realized that whenever Rebecca made a mistake, I became the shield she relied on. She would subtly imply my fault, leave vague instructions that allowed her to later claim mismanagement on my part, and then watch me clean up the mess while she maintained her image. It was exhausting, but I justified it in my head. I was loyal, I was dependable, and in the long run, I believed loyalty would be rewarded. The tipping point came when we were working on a massive campaign for a client that was supposed to be our biggest account of the year. I had spent weeks preparing the strategy, drafting proposals, and coordinating with designers and copywriters. Everything was scheduled down to the hour. Then, a week before the launch, Rebecca decided to change the core messaging without telling anyone. She emailed me at 11 p.m., asking me to rework everything by the next morning. I stayed up all night, redoing slides, rewriting copy, and emailing the updated strategy to the client before their 9 a.m. meeting. The client loved it. They were thrilled with the changes. They praised the campaign and thanked me personally for the hard work. I expected, at the very least, a note from Rebecca acknowledging the extra effort, maybe even recognition at our next team meeting. Instead, what I got was an email that made my stomach drop. "Samantha, I'm disappointed in the errors in this report. We need to discuss this in our one-on-one tomorrow." Errors. I reread the report multiple times. The metrics were correct. The slides matched the client's request. Every tiny detail had been checked and double-checked. When I asked her to clarify, she said, "There were inconsistencies in the alignment of the charts. It's not huge, but it doesn't look professional. Just make sure it's perfect next time." I felt like my brain had been punched. Not only had I spent a night fixing her mistakes, but now she was subtly undermining my work in writing. And of course, no one else knew the hours I had put in. To the rest of the team, it looked like I had just made a minor formatting error. The next day, during our one-on-one, she smiled at me like nothing had happened. "Samantha, you've been handling the new client really well. I appreciate all your effort. But we need to work on your attention to detail. We can't have mistakes when the client is watching." I nodded silently, holding back my frustration. By then, I had learned that arguing didn't help. The loyalty, the hard work, the nights spent fixing her errors, none of that mattered if she could make it look like I was at fault. And yet, I kept doing it. Every time. Because I still believed that loyalty would eventually be noticed, rewarded, or at least respected. It wasn't. Not at all. Everything came to a head during the quarterly review period, the time when promotions, bonuses, and raises were decided. I had been pushing myself harder than ever, staying late, taking on Rebecca's urgent projects, and handling crises she created but never owned. I thought I had positioned myself as her obvious choice for promotion, especially after I single-handedly managed the launch of a new client campaign that brought in record revenue for the firm. I hadn't just handled it. I had made it look seamless, polished, and professional. The week before the review, Rebecca came into my office with a stack of reports. "Samantha, I need you to finalize these tonight. The client is reviewing tomorrow, and I want everything perfect. Also, don't forget to update the presentation deck for the board meeting next week." I looked at the pile of work and felt a familiar pang of frustration. "That's a lot for one night," I said carefully, trying not to sound resentful. Her smile was practiced and calm. "You're my right hand, Sam. I know you can handle it. That's why I always rely on you. You're indispensable." Her words were flattering, but I had learned to read between the lines. Didn't mean respected or promoted. It meant expend a believer for your mistakes. I bit back my cynicism and went to work. That night, I stayed until 2 a.m., checking the reports, refining every detail, and making sure the presentation deck was flawless. When I finally sent everything to her inbox, I felt a mix of exhaustion and accomplishment. I knew she would take the credit. That had never bothered me before. But this time I thought, maybe just maybe she'd have to acknowledge my work to HR or the board. The next morning, everything seemed normal. Rebecca was cheerful, sipping her latte, chatting with coworkers as if she had done nothing but sip coffee while I labored all night. I noticed HR had scheduled a one-on-one with her first thing in the morning, probably to discuss promotions. But I didn't think much of it. After all, she always managed these meetings effortlessly. Then came the email that shattered my illusions. "Congratulations, Rebecca, on your promotion to Senior Director of Client Strategy. Your dedication and leadership have been exceptional." I stared at the screen, my fingers frozen above the keyboard. I felt my chest tighten, my stomach twist, and a wave of disbelief wash over me. Her promotion. Not mine. I called HR immediately, trying to keep my voice steady. Excuse me, I was wondering about the promotions for this quarter. I contributed extensively to several major accounts and handled critical client issues. Was there a review of my work? The HR representative's voice was polite but firm. Samantha, we reviewed everyone's performance. You've been doing well in your role. But the promotion committee felt Rebecca demonstrated leadership qualities appropriate for the senior director position. They noted her client management and oversight of the team. I felt numb. Oversight of the team. I did the work. I managed everything when issues came up. I literally prevented a major from leaving because of her mistakes. Isn't that leadership? There was a pause. Leadership is not just execution, Samantha. It's about strategic vision, delegation, and accountability. The committee felt Rebecca excelled in those areas. I hung up, my hands trembling, my vision blurred, and for the first time in my life, I questioned everything I thought I knew about loyalty, hard work, and fairness. I had sacrificed nights, weekends, and personal time. I had handled crises that could have ruined the company's reputation. And yet, the reward went to the person who had blamed me for mistakes, taken credit for my efforts, and left me to bear the consequences. I went into the office that day, sitting at my desk like a ghost. My coworkers offered sympathetic looks, but no one could truly understand the mix of betrayal and humiliation I felt. The office was buzzing with congratulations for Rebecca. She received flowers, emails, and handshakes from every department head. People praised her leadership and strategic vision. Not a single word about me. Not a nod to the nights I stayed late cleaning up disasters she caused. Not a whisper of acknowledgement for my loyalty. A week later, I confronted her directly. I walked into her office and said, "Rebecca, can we talk?" She looked up from her laptop, smiling. "Of course, Sam!" "What's up?" "I don't understand. I've been handling crises, covering mistakes, and ensuring client satisfaction. Yet you got the promotion instead of me. Can you explain why?" She leaned back, crossing her legs casually. "Samantha, you're taking this too personally. Promotions are about perception, not just execution. I've been here longer, I manage the team, and I present our work to the board. You're great at what you do, but leadership requires more than just completing tasks." I felt anger inside me. So loyalty counts for nothing. Staying late, covering your mistakes, keeping clients happy, none of that is considered leadership. She shrugged. Leadership is about taking credit and delegating wisely. You're too focused on the wrong things. I'm sorry you feel unappreciated, but this is how the company views growth. That day, I realized something fundamental: loyalty gets punished. The very quality I had cultivated, the one that made me a dependable, valuable team member, had become my undoing. I had given my time, energy, and trust without question, and in return, I was invisible, just a cog behind the one who took the credit. For the next several weeks, I went through the motions. I completed my tasks, attended meetings, and smiled politely at Rebecca's congratulatory emails. But inside I was furious, humiliated, and disillusioned. Every night, I replayed the moments where I had bent over backward to save her skin, where I had stayed late, and every little thing I had done to make her look good. And with each memory, the realization hit harder: loyalty, in the wrong hands, could be weaponized against you. The fallout wasn't immediate, but it was subtle and pervasive. Suddenly, I noticed things I hadn't paid attention to before. The way people in meetings deferred to Rebecca. The way her voice carried more authority simply because of her title. The way I was expected to produce the work while she got the recognition. My efforts became invisible, like I was the air conditioning necessary, reliable, but never praised. It hurt more than I expected. I had always taken pride in my work, believing that diligence and loyalty would speak for themselves. But in that office, they didn't. they never did. People started offering congratulations to Rebecca in casual conversations, leaving me in the background, a spectator to my own career's trajectory. Even my closest colleagues, friends I had confided in for years, were careful not to appear too close to me, perhaps fearing they would be dragged into some uncomfortable office politics if they acknowledged the injustice. Then came the subtle tests. A few weeks after her promotion, a high-stakes client called with a last-minute change that required immediate attention. Everyone in the office assumed I would handle it, and I did. I rearranged schedules, rewrote presentations, and coordinated with designers, copywriters, and account managers, all while Rebecca attended an off-site meeting for senior staff. When the client expressed delight with the smooth turnaround, I expected at least a "thank you" from Rebecca. Instead, she sent a brief email to the entire team. "Great job, team. This shows how strong our department has become. Everyone should note our progress on this account." The phrasing made it sound as if the success was a team achievement in which she played the starring role. The fact that I had orchestrated nearly every detail seemed irrelevant. It stung, but by then I was almost used to it. I nodded politely, sent a terse reply acknowledging her message, and sat down, feeling the familiar weight of invisibility. At home, though, it hit harder. I couldn't stop thinking about the contrast between her career path and mine, and it was worse because I had genuinely believed in her. I had gone above and beyond because I thought loyalty would be rewarded. I had taken on her burdens, managed her mistakes, and shielded her from criticism, all because I trusted that integrity and commitment counted for something. Now I realized they didn't. At least, not in that office. My friends noticed the change in me. "You look exhausted," my roommate said one evening as I came home past 10 p.m., after finalizing another campaign deck. "And stressed. Are you still working all these late nights?" I shrugged. "It's just part of the job." "You're literally killing yourself for someone else to get promoted," she said bluntly. "Do you see what's happening here?" Her words made me wince. I had seen it intellectually, but hearing it spoken aloud made it undeniable. Loyalty had been my weapon for survival, and yet it had been turned against me. I had built my reputation on being dependable. But in a hierarchy where image mattered more than effort, being dependable meant being invisible, being a doormat, being someone who could be counted on to fail silently. I started to notice patterns that had been there all along. Rebecca would assign tasks ambiguously, leaving room for mistakes she could later attribute to others. She would casually comment on my overthinking, in team meetings, subtly undermining my authority. She would accept accolades for team projects she had barely touched, and any time I tried to advocate for myself, she would respond with practiced charm and a patronizing tone that made me question whether I was really overreacting. One particularly brutal week cemented my understanding of how this system worked. We were preparing for the annual industry awards, and the firm had nominated a campaign I had managed from start to finish. Rebecca had been traveling and missed most of the client meetings, yet she signed off on every deliverable. When the awards were announced, the firm received top honors, and Rebecca gave a speech thanking the team, and specifically highlighting her leadership. Not a word about the months I spent managing client calls, preparing presentations, and troubleshooting last-minute issues. I sat in my office, staring at my hands, feeling a mix of anger, sadness, and disbelief. The realization hit me fully. Being loyal to the wrong person could make you invisible, expendable, and even punished. Every ounce of effort I had poured into covering her mistakes, defending her decisions, and presenting her as capable had contributed to her success. Not mine. My loyalty had been weaponized against me. I started thinking about what I had really gained from the situation. The promotion had not just been denied, it had been handed to the person whose actions had caused me the most stress. In a twisted way, the office rewarded manipulation, image management, and the ability to dodge responsibility. Meanwhile, honesty, diligence, and loyalty were treated as liabilities, vulnerabilities that could be exploited. It was during this period that I began quietly reassessing my career and my priorities. I documented every project, every achievement, every contribution that had been overlooked. I started networking more seriously outside of the firm, reaching out to colleagues in other companies, attending industry events, and looking at opportunities that valued skill and integrity rather than optics and political maneuvering. For the first time, I realized that my loyalty should be earned, not assumed or exploited. I also started to confront my own emotional responses. I had to process the anger, the betrayal, and the sense of humiliation that had accumulated over months of being unacknowledged. Therapy helped. My therapist reminded me that resentment and frustration were natural, but staying in a toxic dynamic for the sake of loyalty was self-destructive. She encouraged me to view my experience not as a failure, but as a lesson in identifying environments where my contributions would be valued and where loyalty was reciprocated rather than exploited. Little by little, I began asserting myself. I learned to say no when asked to take on unreasonable last-minute tasks. I stopped volunteering for projects solely to make Rebecca look good. And I learned the hard lesson that advocating for myself was not betrayal, it was survival. My coworkers noticed the shift. Some were puzzled, others relieved, and a few even started following my lead, realizing that her leadership style had been unfair to the team as a whole. By the end of that quarter, while Rebecca enjoyed the perks of her promotion, private office, larger salary, recognition at board meetings, I felt a new kind of clarity. I understood that loyalty, in the wrong hands, could be punished. But I also realized that loyalty to myself, to my values and integrity, was something no one could take away. The turning point came one Thursday afternoon. I had been quietly rebuilding my career strategy, updating my resume, networking, and even taking on freelance projects outside the firm to remind myself I was capable without relying on Rebecca's validation. But that Thursday, something happened that made it impossible to ignore the toxicity I had endured for so long. Rebecca called me into her office with a cheerful tone that immediately made my stomach tighten. "Samantha! I have some exciting news about a new client. You'll be spearheading the team. It's a huge opportunity," she said, eyes bright and expectant. I paused at her door, the familiar mix of disbelief and skepticism washing over me. "I spearhead the team?" I asked, trying to keep my voice even. "Yes! You'll manage the campaign, coordinate with clients, handle deliverables, everything. I trust you completely to execute it." For a moment, I considered smiling and saying thank you. After all, on paper, it sounded like recognition. But then I remembered the countless times she had thrown me under the bus, blamed me for mistakes, and then reaped the rewards. This wasn't recognition, it was another opportunity for her to take credit while I did the work. "I appreciate the trust, Rebecca," I said carefully. "But I think it's important that leadership responsibilities align with actual authority and accountability. I'm happy to support the team, but I don't think it makes sense for me to carry this alone while you retain all oversight and credit." Her smile faltered for the briefest second. "I don't understand, Sam. This is a promotion of sorts. Think of it as a chance to shine." I shook my head. "I've spent years making your mistakes invisible and covering for you. I'm done enabling a system that rewards disloyalty and punishes integrity. I'm stepping back from this responsibility." There was a pause, and I saw it then, a flicker of something vulnerable in her eyes. Perhaps surprise, perhaps annoyance, maybe even a touch of fear that I had finally realized the truth. But it disappeared just as quickly as it appeared. "Samantha, that's dramatic," she said. "You're overreacting. This is a chance for growth, and you're throwing it away because of personal grievances." I laughed bitterly. Personal grievances? No, Rebecca? This is about recognizing that loyalty without reciprocity is exploitation. I've learned that the hard way. I refuse to be complicit any longer. I left her office feeling a weight lift off my shoulders. It wasn't a victory in the traditional sense. I hadn't forced her to acknowledge my contributions, and I hadn't received the promotion I had worked for. But I had reclaimed something far more important: my agency. For the first time in years, I realized that I didn't have to define my worth by her validation or the credit she claimed for my work. That evening, I submitted my notice. The decision was not easy. This company had been my professional home for nearly 6 years, and I had invested so much of myself into it. But I knew that staying would only continue the cycle of invisibility and exploitation. In my resignation letter, I kept it professional, emphasizing my desire to explore new opportunities and continue growing in environments where integrity and hard work were valued. The next few weeks were surreal. Colleagues whispered, some offered condolences, others congratulated me on taking a stand. Rebecca sent a few carefully worded emails expressing regret and wishing me all the best in future endeavors, but there was no genuine acknowledgement of how her behavior had affected me. I realized that closure from her would never come; it had to come from within. I spent my final days at the company documenting my projects, handing over responsibilities, and quietly tying up loose ends. Each task reminded me of the countless nights I had spent fixing her errors, defending her choices, and sacrificing my time for her benefit. But instead of feeling resentment, I felt a growing sense of liberation. I had survived, and I was leaving on my terms. When my last day arrived, I walked out of the office with a sense of calm I hadn't felt in years. I didn't look back. I didn't wait for a farewell party or a last-minute acknowledgement. I stepped into the sunlight and let myself breathe freely for the first time in what felt like a lifetime. The months that followed were transformative. I accepted a new position at a smaller, but more ethically aligned firm that valued collaboration, transparency, and genuine recognition. For the first time, my contributions were visible, appreciated, and rewarded. I didn't have to work myself into exhaustion to gain respect. Respect was given freely because I earned it, and the environment nurtured integrity rather than exploiting it. I also took time to reflect on the lessons I had learned from my experience with Rebecca. Loyalty is not inherently virtuous. It only has value when it is mutual. Blind devotion to someone who manipulates, exploits, or disregards your efforts is not admirable, it's self-destructive. I had once believed that going above and beyond for someone else would guarantee recognition, reward, and career growth. I learned that in some systems, the opposite is true. Loyalty can be punished, and integrity can be overshadowed by image management and self-interest. It wasn't easy to accept, but understanding this allowed me to rebuild my career with intention. I learned to set boundaries, advocate for myself, and recognize environments where my skills and loyalty would be respected rather than exploited. I began mentoring junior colleagues, sharing the wisdom I had painfully acquired, teaching them to balance dedication with self-preservation. Occasionally, I hear updates about Rebecca. She's thriving in her role, receiving accolades, and continuing to excel in the office politics she navigates so expertly. And while part of me still feels anger and a sting of betrayal, I've accepted that her success does not diminish mine. My journey is no longer defined by the injustice I endured. It is defined by the choices I made to reclaim my career, my boundaries, and my dignity. Looking back, I understand now more than ever loyalty is a double-edged sword. In the wrong hands, it can be used as a weapon against you, a tool for manipulation and control. But in the right environment, loyalty, integrity, and dedication are powerful forces that are recognized and rewarded. The difference lies not in the effort itself, but in where you choose to invest it. Walking away from that office was terrifying, humbling, and exhilarating all at once. But it was also the moment I truly understood my worth. and for the first time in years, I felt confident that my loyalty, this time, to myself, would never be punished. What do you think about this story? Did you expect this ending? Let me know in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if you want to see more.